The sun was high and bright, baking the dry land that stretched endlessly around the ranch. Clara wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, feeling the heat cling to her like a second skin. She had grown up in a small town, but this part of the countryside was different, rougher, wilder, and somehow lonelier. The ranch sprawled across hundreds of acres with dusty trails, fenced pastures, and the faint smell of hay and animals mixing in the hot air. She had always been curious about the place, but she had never had a reason to come this far out, until today. Clara's heart beat a little faster as she approached the main barn. She had been tasked with delivering supplies to the ranch. Not many people came out this far, and she was aware that strangers were rarely welcomed. The gates creaked as she pushed them open, and she paused to take a deep breath. The silence of the land was striking. There were no sounds of passing cars, no chatter of neighbors, only the distant call of a bird and the soft rustle of the dry grass in the wind. She spotted him immediately. Jack the rancher was tall and solid, a man in his 50s with broad shoulders and hands that were rough and calloused from years of hard work. His hair, touched with gray, was pushed back from his forehead, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the fence he was repairing. He moved with a quiet strength, precise and efficient, as if every action had been practiced hundreds of times. Clara felt a twinge of nervousness. She had heard stories about him from the locals. People called him tough, strict, and sometimes unyielding, but fair. He rarely spoke more than necessary, and even his closest friends knew he kept much of himself hidden. Clara's footsteps made a soft crunching sound on the gravel path as she approached. She called out politely, "Mr. Jack, I have some supplies for you." Jack didn't immediately respond. He was focused on the fence, tightening a loose plank with careful precision. When he finally turned, his eyes met hers, assessing and slightly wary. Clara felt a small shiver run down her spine. There was something about the way he looked at her, like he was measuring how serious she was, whether she belonged here or was just wasting his time. "Clara," he said finally, his voice low and steady, "I wasn't expecting anyone today. You shouldn't have come out here alone." She swallowed hard, trying to hide her nervousness. I just wanted to make sure these supplies got here. You've got a lot going on and I thought I could help." Her voice wavered a little, but she forced a smile. Jack's expression softened ever so slightly, though the lines of caution remained. "I'll take the supplies," he said. "Leave them over by the barn." As Clara moved to place the boxes down, she couldn't help but notice how different the ranch looked up close. The barn was massive, weathered by years of sun and storms, but still standing strong. Inside, she could hear the low hum of animals, horses shifting their weight in the stalls, a cow chewing lazily, and the occasional clatter of hooves against wood. The air smelled faintly of hay and leather, a scent both comforting and foreign at the same time. Jack continued working on the fence, but Clara lingered nearby. She wanted to leave, to retreat to the safety of the small town she knew so well, yet something made her stay. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was the quiet mystery that surrounded Jack in this place. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and walked closer, pretending to inspect the fence while really trying to take in every detail of the man before her. As she watched, she noticed how skilled he was. Each movement was deliberate, almost like a dance. He hammered nails with a steady hand, aligned the wooden planks perfectly, and stepped back to examine his work before moving on. Clara realized that this was a man who had spent his life learning how to master the land, how to shape it and care for it in ways most people never understood. He was tough, yes, but there was pride in the precision of his work. Clara's eyes wandered for a moment, and that's when she saw it, a small glint among the dirt and wood. Something delicate, out of place against the rough textures of the ranch. She moved closer and noticed it was a locket, small and old, with intricate designs on its surface. Her heart skipped a beat. She had seen this kind of locket before, long ago when she was a child. It had belonged to someone very important in her past, someone she hadn't thought about in years. "Where did you find this?" she asked softly, almost whispering. She didn't want to sound accusatory or intrusive, but her curiosity had taken over. Jack's hands paused mid-motion. He looked at the locket for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked back at her, his eyes sharp, measuring her reaction. "It's mine," he said simply, in a tone that closed the conversation before it could begin. Clara felt a shiver of disappointment. She had hoped he might say something more, Perhaps a story, a memory, anything that could explain why this small object had ended up here. But Jack didn't say anything further. He returned to the fence, his hands moving again with the same steady rhythm as before. Clara stood there torn. She knew she should leave, that her curiosity might be unwelcome. But the locket had stirred something in her. Memories, questions, a longing she couldn't ignore. She found herself inching closer, pretending to inspect the ground near the fence while her mind raced with possibilities. Could this locket really be connected to her past? And if it was, why had it ended up here in the hands of a man who seemed so distant and unapproachable? The wind picked up, stirring the dry grass and carrying the faint scent of the nearby river. Clara shivered again, not from the temperature but from anticipation. There was something about this place, this man, and this small, delicate object that made her feel like she was on the edge of a secret that had been hidden for far too long. Jack glanced at her briefly, as if sensing her attention. There was no anger in his eyes, just a quiet warning, an unspoken message that some things were not to be rushed, some stories not to be forced. Clara nodded slightly, understanding the warning, but she couldn't let it go entirely. There was a pull she couldn't explain, a sense that the story of this locket and the story of this man was far more complex than it appeared. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch, Clara knew she had to leave soon. But she also knew this encounter was only the beginning. Something had been set in motion, a chain of events that would lead her deeper into the mysteries of the ranch, and into a man whose life was as hidden and rugged as the land he tended. With one last glance at the locket, Clara picked up her bag and started toward the gate. The ranch was quiet again, the soft sounds of animals and the wind filling the space between her and Jack. She felt a strange mix of fear, curiosity, and anticipation. She knew she would return, that she couldn't stay away for long. The ranch, the man, and the locket had already woven themselves into the threads of her life, and there was no turning back. Jack watched her leave, standing still for a moment, the hammer in his hand forgotten. He knew she had noticed something, sensed something that had been hidden for years, and for the first time in a long while he felt a flicker of uncertainty, a warning that the past he had tried so hard to leave behind might finally be catching up with him. The sun sank lower, bathing the ranch in golden light, and Clara disappeared beyond the gate, unaware that her life and Jack's was about to change in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The next morning, Clara woke before the sun. Her thoughts were restless, swirling with images of the ranch, the locket, and the man who had seemed so distant yet so intriguing. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat by the kitchen window, staring out at the quiet streets of her town. The locket she had seen yesterday haunted her, small but powerful, like it held a secret that had been waiting for her to notice. She tried to push it out of her mind, but she couldn't. The memory of Jack's eyes, sharp and guarded, followed her wherever she went. There was something about him that was both intimidating and magnetic. Clara shook her head, trying to focus on her day, but the urge to return to the ranch was growing stronger with every passing hour. She knew she had to go back, even though part of her feared what she might discover. By mid-morning, she found herself walking along the dusty road that led to the ranch. Her heart beat faster as the familiar silhouette of the barn came into view. The wind carried the same faint smells as yesterday: hay, earth, and the quiet presence of animals. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder, which now felt heavier with both supplies and unspoken questions. Jack was already outside when she arrived, working on a patch of fence that seemed to need constant attention. He noticed her almost immediately, his eyes narrowing slightly, though there was no overt expression of surprise. He had been expecting her, it seemed, though she had not sent any notice. Clara reminded herself that in a place like this, a man like Jack had an instinct for knowing who was coming and when. "Good morning," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Jack grunted in acknowledgement, not looking directly at her at first. Then he set down the tools he had been using and wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "You're back," he said simply, his tone neutral but calm. "Did you bring more supplies?" "Yes," Claire replied, setting her bag down carefully. "But I also wanted to ask about the locket, the one I saw yesterday." Jack's hands froze mid-motion, and he turned to look at her fully this time. Clara noticed the slight tension in his posture, a flicker of something unspoken passing across his face. For a moment he said nothing, and the silence between them stretched uncomfortably. "It's old," he said finally, his voice low. "It doesn't mean much anymore." Clara hesitated, feeling the frustration and curiosity rising within her. "It does to me," she said gently. "I've seen one like it before. When I was a child. It belonged to someone important in my life. Please, can you tell me where it came from?" Jack looked away, staring at the fence as if he could lose himself in the work and escape the question. He ran a hand through his hair, and Clara noticed the faint line of worry across his forehead. He was clearly struggling with whether or not to share the truth. After a long pause, he spoke again, his tone quieter this time. "That locket. It's part of a past I try not to think about. Some things are better left buried." Clara took a careful step closer, lowering her voice. "I understand you may want to keep some things private, but maybe it's time to let someone know. I think it's connected to my family, and I can't stop thinking about it." Jack's gaze shifted back to her, and for the first time she noticed the subtle vulnerability in his eyes. The hard, guarded exterior she had seen yesterday was cracking, if only slightly. He exhaled slowly, as though deciding whether he could trust her. "All right," he said at last, "but you have to listen carefully. And you have to promise me. You won't judge what I'm about to tell you." Clara nodded earnestly. "I promise." Jack motioned for her to sit on a nearby log while he leaned against the fence. The wind stirred the dry grass, carrying the faint sounds of the animals nearby, and Clara felt the tension in her chest ease slightly. She knew this was the moment that would change everything. "I grew up not far from here," Jack began, "but life was never easy. My family struggled, and I learned early on that you could only rely on yourself. That locket. It belonged to someone I loved long ago. Someone I lost because of choices I made, choices I regret every single day." Clara listened, captivated. She could see the weight of his words in the way he spoke, the quiet sorrow in his voice that contrasted with the tough exterior he showed everyone else. She realized that Jack wasn't just a rough, distant rancher. He was a man carrying the weight of years of mistakes and regrets, just like anyone else. "The locket ended up here by accident," he continued. "I found it years ago when I was working a different ranch. I kept it because it reminded me of her, and the life I lost. I never meant for anyone else to see it." Clara felt a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Her mind raced with questions, but she didn't interrupt. She wanted him to speak, to tell the story fully without feeling pressured. Jack paused, looking down at his hands, which were still rough and calloused, despite the gentleness of his tone. "It wasn't just love I lost," he admitted. "It was trust, safety, the chance to have a normal life. That's why I work this land so hard. I keep myself busy, so I don't have to think about the past too much. And that locket, it's a reminder of everything I've lost and everything I can't get back." Clara felt her chest tighten. She had never seen someone so strong admit so much pain. She wanted to reach out, to comfort him somehow, but she didn't. Instead, she sat quietly, letting his words sink in. She realized that the ranch, the fence, the animals, it wasn't just work for him. It was a shield, a way to protect himself from the memories that haunted him every day. For a few moments, they sat in silence. The wind whispered through the grass, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch. Clara felt a sense of connection, fragile but real. She knew that Jack's story was far from over, that the locket was only the beginning of something much larger. Suddenly, a sound from the barn startled them both. A horse neighed loudly, and the sound echoed across the open land. Jack's posture stiffened, his eyes scanning the area as if he had expected trouble. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She realized that life on the ranch was not as calm as it seemed. Danger could appear in unexpected ways, and Jack had likely faced it countless times before. "Everything okay?" she asked cautiously. Jack nodded, though his expression remained tense. "Just the horses," he said. "They're easily startled. But it's a reminder. This land, this work, it's never as quiet as it looks." Clara nodded, understanding. She felt a thrill of excitement mixed with fear. The ranch was more alive than she had imagined, full of unpredictability and hidden stories waiting to be discovered. And now, with Jack sharing part of his past, the mysteries felt closer than ever. As the morning passed, Clara helped with some of the chores, feeding animals, moving supplies, and mending small sections of the fence under Jack's watchful eye. She noticed how methodical he was, how every movement was precise, and she realized that this was a man who had survived by being careful, by paying attention to the smallest details. She tried to keep up, though her hands ached and the heat pressed down on her. At one point, she glanced down at the locket again, which had been set carefully aside in her bag. She felt a strange mix of reverence and curiosity. This small, delicate object held so much power, connecting past and present in a way she couldn't fully understand yet. She knew that the story was far from over, that the locket, Jack, and the secrets it carried would pull her deeper into a world she hadn't known existed. By the time the sun reached its peak, Clara and Jack had worked in companionable silence for hours. Neither spoke much, but the shared effort built a quiet bond between them. Clara realized that trust wasn't given. It was earned slowly through actions, patience, and understanding. And she felt herself wanting to earn Jack's trust, even if she didn't yet know what that would demand. Finally, Jack paused and leaned against the fence, wiping sweat from his brow. "You've done well today," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. "Not many people last this long on a ranch, especially out here in the heat." "You've got grit, Clara. I can respect that." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. "Thank you, it's different, helping out here. I think I understand more about you in this place now." Jack gave her a faint nod, then looked down at the ground, lost in thought. Clara sensed that there were still stories he hadn't told, memories he had kept locked away, and questions he wasn't ready to answer. But she also sensed that a door had opened, however slightly, and that the future held more revelations, more challenges, and more connection than either of them had expected. As the day ended and Clara prepared to leave, she glanced one last time at the fence, the animals, and the land that seemed so alive under Jack's care. She felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, knowing that she would return. There were more answers to uncover, more stories to hear, and the locket was only the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives. The following days passed quickly, each one bringing Clara back to the ranch. She could not stay away. Every visit felt like stepping into a world that was both familiar and strange, full of routines, animals, fences, and stories waiting to be discovered. Jack had begun to trust her slightly more, allowing her to help with the chores and, at times, telling small stories of his past. Yet the locket remained a delicate and unspoken presence between them, an object loaded with mystery, holding the key to memories neither of them fully understood yet. One late afternoon, Clara arrived at the ranch to find Jack near the edge of the pasture. He was standing by a tree, looking down at a shallow creek that ran along the boundary of the land. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the landscape. Clara noticed how quiet the ranch was at this hour, as if the land itself were holding its breath. "Hello," she called softly, stepping closer. Jack turned slowly, a faint smile touching the corners of his mouth. "You're early," he said, though there was no sharpness in his tone this time. "I couldn't wait," Clara admitted, lowering her bag to the ground. I wanted to see if you were okay and maybe talk." Jack nodded and gestured for her to sit on a nearby rock. Clara obeyed, feeling the rough texture of the stone against her palms. They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the soft trickle of the creek and the rustle of leaves in the light evening breeze. There was a peacefulness here that contrasted sharply with the tension she had felt on her first visit. But beneath it, a quiet anticipation lingered. Something was about to change, she sensed. Jack finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about the locket," he said slowly, "and about how it connects to you. I didn't want to bring it up too soon, but maybe the time is right." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She leaned forward slightly, careful not to seem too eager. "I want to know," she whispered. "I need to know." Jack exhaled, a long, slow breath. "The truth isn't simple," he warned. "It's messy and it's painful. But if you're ready, I'll tell you everything I know." Clara nodded, bracing herself. She had a feeling that the story would be more complicated than she had imagined, but she was determined. Jack began slowly, choosing his words with care. "Years ago, before this ranch was mine, I worked for another family not far from here. They were kind in some ways, but there were problems I couldn't fix. That's where I first saw the locket, at a house where a little girl lived. She wore it always. And that little girl, she reminded me of someone I once loved and lost. The locket became a symbol for the past I couldn't let go of. Clara's hands tightened in her lap. The words felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, though she didn't yet know the full picture. The little girl. It was me? She asked carefully. Jack looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and uncertainty. Yes, he said finally. I didn't realize it at first, but over time I began to understand. The locket. It belonged to your mother. Or at least it belonged to someone very close to her, and somehow it ended up in my hands. Clara's mind reeled. Memories from her childhood, long buried, began to surface. The small, intricate locket she remembered, the way it had been, lost, the stories her mother had whispered. Everything connected in a strange and unexpected way. I don't understand how it got here, she said softly. Jack shook his head. Neither do I completely. It was found years ago during a move. I kept it, not knowing its importance at first. And then, seeing you now, I realize how much history it carries. It's not just a piece of jewelry. It's a connection, a memory, a reminder of people who shaped our lives. Clara's chest tightened. She felt a mix of relief, sorrow, and curiosity. So, you've known about it all this time? She asked. Jack nodded slowly. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid. Afraid of what it might mean. Afraid of opening old wounds. And maybe, afraid of what it would do to us. Clara studied him, noticing the lines of worry etched into his face. He had carried the secret for so long, and yet he had chosen to share it now. She felt respect and empathy welling up inside her. I'm glad you told me, she said softly, even if it's painful. We can face it together. Jack's eyes softened. For the first time, the hardened, stoic exterior he wore like armor seemed to fade, replaced by something more human, more vulnerable. Maybe, he said quietly. But there's more to it. The locket. It's not the only secret. There are things I've kept hidden, things that could change how you see me, how you see the past. Clara felt a shiver run through her, not from fear, but from anticipation. I need to know, she said. I can handle it. Jack took a long pause, then began again. Years ago, before I settled here, there was an incident. Something that involved people from your family. It wasn't intentional, but it caused pain. That pain, it affected everyone involved, including you. And the locket, in a way, it's part of that story. A reminder of what was lost and what could never be undone. Clara's heart pounded. She tried to focus, to listen carefully without interrupting. Each word Jack spoke felt like it was drawing a map of the past she had only glimpsed in fragments. Every detail mattered, and she realized that understanding this story might help her make sense of her own memories. As Jack spoke, he gestured toward the creek. We used to come here often. It was a place to think, to escape. But that day, something happened that changed everything. People made choices, and some of those choices were irreversible. I tried to protect you even when I didn't know how. And the locket, it was a piece of that protection, a symbol that someone was looking out for you, even from afar. Clara swallowed hard. The tension in her chest was almost unbearable, but she stayed still, listening. She realized that the past she had only glimpsed through memories and stories was now coming alive before her, connected to the man sitting beside her and the land that stretched endlessly around them. The locket was never meant to be lost, Jack continued. It was meant to wait until the right time, until someone could understand its significance, and now, you're here. You're the one who was meant to find it, who was meant to see it again. But there are still dangers, secrets that weren't meant to be uncovered too quickly. That's why I hesitated to tell you. Clara felt a mixture of awe and determination. I don't want to run from the past anymore, she said. I want to understand it, even if it's difficult. I need to know everything. Jack studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well," he said. "But you have to promise. We take it step by step. Some things are delicate, and rushing could make them worse. There's a balance between knowing the truth and being ready for it." Clara agreed. "I'll take it step by step," she said. "I can wait. I can handle it." For the next few hours, they walked along the creek and the edge of the pasture, talking quietly. Jack shared more fragments of his life, stories of the land, of the people he had met, of mistakes made and lessons learned. Each story was carefully measured, revealing just enough to build understanding while keeping the larger secrets safely veiled. Clara listened intently, asking gentle questions when appropriate, feeling the pieces of the puzzle slowly come together. As the sun dipped lower behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land, Clara realized something important. The ranch, the locket, and Jack himself were all part of a living, breathing story, a story that was unfinished, fragile, and full of hidden layers. And she was no longer just a visitor. She was part of it now, intertwined with its past, present, and future in ways she could not yet fully grasp. Finally, as darkness began to settle over the ranch, Jack and Clara returned to the barn. The animals were quiet now, and the air was cooler, carrying the faint scent of earth and grass. Jack set down his tools and looked at Clara with a quiet intensity. "You're brave to face this," he said. "Not everyone would want to know the truth, but you have the courage to keep going." Clara felt a swell of emotion. She had come here seeking answers, but she had found something more: connection, trust, and the knowledge that even the hardest truths could be faced with care and patience. As she left the ranch that evening, the locket felt heavier in her thoughts. No longer just a small piece of jewelry, but a symbol of the journey ahead. She knew that the story was far from over, that the turning point was approaching, and that both she and Jack would have to confront truths that had long been buried. But for the first time, she felt ready. The morning air at the ranch was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and hay from the previous night's dew. Clara walked along the familiar gravel path, her steps steady but her heart beating faster than usual. Today felt different. There was a tension in the air she couldn't explain, a feeling that something significant was about to happen. She clutched her bag tightly, the locket safely tucked inside, its presence heavier than ever. Jack was already outside when she arrived, standing near the far edge of the pasture. He was watching a group of horses graze quietly, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. Clara hesitated for a moment, observing him. There was a strange intensity in his eyes today, a mix of caution and alertness, as if he were expecting something to appear at any moment. "Morning," she called softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Jack turned slowly, his gaze locking onto hers. "Morning," he replied, his voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk now." Clara felt a surge of anxiety. The urgency in his tone made her pulse quicken. She followed him silently as he led her to a small clearing behind the barn, near a cluster of old oak trees. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting shifting shadows across the ground. Clara could feel her curiosity mingling with a nervous tension, and she sensed that the conversation about to unfold would change everything. Jack stopped and faced her fully. "Yesterday I told you part of the story," he began, his voice low and measured. "But there's more. Things you need to understand about the locket, about your family, and about the events that connected us." Clara nodded, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "I'm ready," she said quietly. Jack exhaled slowly. "This is not easy to say, and I want you to listen carefully because what I'm about to tell you, it may be hard to believe at first." Clara nodded again, bracing herself. She had expected surprises, but she had no idea how deep this story ran. "Years ago, before I came to this ranch, there was an incident involving people from your family," Jack began. "It was a misunderstanding, but it caused a chain of events that no one could stop. Someone was hurt, people were frightened, and decisions were made, decisions that shaped all our lives." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "What happened?" she asked softly. Jack's eyes darkened as he recalled the memories. "It was a summer much like this one," he said. "The sun was high, the land dry. There was a fire near the edge of a property your family owned. I was there, helping to contain it. But things went wrong. People panicked. Mistakes were made. Someone important, someone very close to you, disappeared for a while. The locket you remember was lost in the chaos. I found it later, and I didn't know then whose it was, only that it mattered deeply to someone. Clara felt her chest tighten. The story matched fragments of her own childhood memories, faint images she had long pushed aside. "It was my mother," she whispered. "She disappeared that day. I remember the panic, the fear, but I never knew what happened to her." Jack's jaw tightened. "I tried to protect her, and I tried to protect you, but I was powerless in some ways. The fire, the confusion, it was more than one person could handle. And when I found the locket, I knew it was a link between your family and the past I carried with me. I kept it, hoping that one day the truth could be told safely." Clara felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that someone had looked after her mother and the locket, and sorrow that so many moments of fear and uncertainty had been endured alone. She had lived with questions for years, never imagining that the answers were so close, hidden in the hands of the man standing before her. Jack took a deep breath and continued. "But there's more. The locket. It's not just a memory. It's a warning. That day, during the fire, someone tried to take something from your family, something valuable. It wasn't just the locket that was important. There were threats, people who wanted to hurt or control your family. And some of those people are still around." Clara's heart raced. She had never imagined that the past could have such consequences in the present. "You mean someone could still be after us?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jack nodded, his expression serious. "Yes, that's why I've been careful. Why I've kept the ranch secluded. Why I've been cautious about visitors. And why the locket stayed hidden until now. It's a key, a signal, and it brings attention from those who might not have good intentions." Clara swallowed hard. The weight of the moment pressed on her, but she refused to step back. "Then we have to face it," she said firmly. "We can't let fear control us anymore. If the locket is important, if the past matters, then we deal with it together." Jack studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "All right," he said. "But you must be careful. The next steps will require courage, patience, and trust. And above all, attention to detail. The people we're talking about are clever. They watch, they wait, and they move quickly when least expected." Clara felt a mixture of fear and determination. She realized that the ranch, the locket, and Jack himself were part of a story far bigger than she had imagined. And now she was directly involved. She took a deep breath and steadied herself. "I'm ready," she said. Jack's eyes softened slightly. "Good, because today we take the first step. We check the boundaries, the fences, and the places where the fire could have affected the land. There are clues, small ones, that might help us understand what really happened and what's still at risk." Together, they moved through the ranch, carefully inspecting the land. Jack showed her the places where the fire had licked the edges of the fields, where old fences had burned or been replaced. He pointed out subtle changes in the soil, the trees, and the pasture, small details that told stories of damage, repair, and survival. Clara listened and observed, realizing how much the land itself held memories of the past, acting as a witness to events that had long been hidden from view. As they walked, Clara asked questions and Jack answered, revealing small truths one by one. Each revelation built on the previous, forming a clearer picture of the dangers, the mistakes, and the sacrifices made years ago. Clara felt herself growing stronger, more confident, and more connected to the ranch, to Jack, and to her own past. The sun climbed higher, and the heat pressed down, but neither of them paused. They worked silently for long stretches, letting the land speak through its scars and markers. And then near the far corner of the pasture, Jack froze. Clara noticed immediately. His posture stiffened, his eyes widened slightly, and his hand instinctively moved to the fence post. "What is it?" Clara asked, her voice low, matching his tension. Jack pointed subtly toward the ground. There, half hidden in the grass, was a small object. Clara leaned closer and gasped softly. It was a fragment of metal, old and rusted, yet clearly part of something larger. This is from the past," Jack said, his voice tense. "It's a clue. Something left behind during the chaos of the fire. And it's proof that we're not alone in remembering or watching." Clara's heart pounded. She realized that the story they had uncovered so far was only the beginning. The fragment was more than a piece of metal. It was a sign, a warning, a thread connecting the past and present. She looked at Jack, who was studying it intently, his face a mixture of fear, determination, and realization. "We need to follow this," Jack said quietly. "It will lead us to answers. But we must be careful. Whoever left this or whoever remembers it could be nearby. We cannot underestimate them." Clara nodded, gripping the strap of her bag. She felt the thrill of danger, the weight of responsibility, and the certainty that this day would change everything. Together they moved carefully, scanning the area, aware that the turning point of their story had arrived. The secrets, the locket, and the land were no longer distant memories. They were alive, demanding action, attention, and courage. As the afternoon shadows grew long and the air shimmered in the heat, Clara understood the truth. The past could no longer remain hidden. The locket, the fire, and the choices of years ago were converging now, and both she and Jack would have to face the consequences. There was no turning back. The air was heavy with tension as Clara and Jack moved cautiously through the pasture, following the trail that the fragment had revealed. The sun was low now, casting long, flickering shadows that made the trees seem taller, the fences longer, and the ranch itself more mysterious than ever. Clara's heart pounded, not just from the physical effort of walking over uneven ground, but from the awareness that today would bring answers, answers that had been buried for years. Jack led the way, his eyes sharp and alert, scanning the edges of the pasture for anything out of place. Clara followed closely, her hands gripping the strap of her bag and the locket tucked safely inside. Every step felt deliberate, like walking through a living memory. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down, mingling with the present, demanding attention. After several minutes of cautious movement, Jack stopped. He crouched near a mound of earth and pointed to a partially buried object. Clara leaned closer and recognized it immediately, a small, weathered box worn by time and exposure. She felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with fear. The box was likely connected to the events of that long-ago fire, to the chaos and confusion, and to the secrets that had shaped their lives. "This is it," Jack whispered, his voice tense. "This is what we've been looking for." Clara nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the box. Jack placed a steadying hand over hers. "Careful," he warned. "We don't know what's inside. It could be fragile, or dangerous in ways we can't imagine." With a deep breath, Clara lifted the box from the ground. The dirt and debris fell away, revealing faded engravings and a clasp that was rusted but still functional. She opened it slowly, heart racing, and peered inside. The contents made her gasp softly. Inside were letters, photographs, and a few small objects, each one clearly linked to her family. The locket she had seen before was there too, placed carefully among the other items. Jack crouched beside her, his eyes scanning the contents. "Everything your family lost, or thought they lost, is here," he said quietly.
The letters explain what happened during the fire.
The photographs show who was involved. And the small objects, they're reminders, connections to the past that survived despite everything. Clara carefully lifted a folded letter, her fingers brushing the worn paper. As she read, memories she had long pushed aside came rushing back. The fear she had felt as a child, the confusion, the sense of being abandoned, even if only for a short time, all made sense now. Each word in the letter was a piece of the puzzle, revealing the truth about the fire, about her mother, and about the people who had tried to help her from afar. "They were trying to protect us," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "All this time, someone was watching over us even when we didn't know it." Jack nodded slowly. "Yes, but it wasn't easy. The people involved had to make difficult choices. Some of those choices caused pain, some caused confusion. But the locket, it was meant to survive, to lead you to the truth when the time was right." Clara looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and understanding. "And you kept it safe all these years. You were part of that protection." Jack's gaze softened. "I did what I could," he said quietly. "I couldn't fix everything, and I couldn't always be there when it mattered most. But I never forgot, and now it's time to face the rest." Suddenly, a sound from the far edge of the pasture made them both tense. The rustling of leaves, faint footsteps, a shadow moving through the tall grass. It was subtle, but enough to send a jolt through Clara's body. She glanced at Jack, who was already alert, his posture stiffening. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We're not alone." From the shadows, a figure emerged, a man in his 40s wearing worn clothing and a hat that shaded his face. He stopped a few feet away, hands raised slightly in a gesture of neutrality. Clara's pulse raced. She had no idea if this was someone dangerous or someone connected to the past who had come now to ensure the truth was revealed. "Who are you?" Jack called, his voice steady but firm. The man took a cautious step forward. "I'm someone who knew what happened years ago," he said. "I was there during the fire, and I've been keeping track ever since. I never meant to cause more trouble, but I needed to make sure the truth reached the right person. That's why the box was hidden and why the locket survived." Clara studied him carefully. There was something honest in his tone, a sincerity that seemed to match the story Jack had been telling. She felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. "So you're on our side?" she asked cautiously. The man nodded. "Yes. I wanted to protect your family, and now that you've found the box, it's time for all the pieces to come together. The past can finally be understood." Jack exhaled slowly, lowering his guard slightly. "All right," he said. "Then let's make sure everything is clear. We need to understand the fire, the choices made, and how it connects to today. Clara, it's time for you to see the whole picture." For the next hour, the three of them worked together, examining the contents of the box and discussing the events of that long-ago summer. The letters told stories of sacrifice, fear, and courage. The photographs revealed faces of people Clara had only known in memory, and some she had never met. The objects, the locket, small tokens, and personal items tied everything together, forming a clear narrative of loss, protection, and survival. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Clara felt a sense of closure she had never known before. The past was no longer a mystery. The fear, the confusion, and the questions that had haunted her childhood were finally answered. And she understood the full significance of the locket, not just as a piece of jewelry, but as a symbol of resilience, love, and enduring care. Jack looked at her, his expression softer now. "You've seen the truth," he said quietly. "It's not perfect. The past never is, but it's real, and it's yours to carry forward. The locket, it connects you to your family, to your history, and to the people who tried to protect you when you couldn't protect yourself." Clara smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for keeping it safe, for helping me find the answers." Jack nodded. "You helped yourself too," he said. "You had the courage to return, to face the unknown, and to seek the truth. That's not easy." The man who had joined them stepped back, giving them space. "The past is finally clear," he said, "and now you can move forward. There's nothing left to hide." Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years lift from her shoulders. The ranch, the land, and the people she had come to trust were all part of her story now. She understood that while the past had been difficult, it had also shaped her, taught her resilience, and connected her to people she could rely on. As the sun set behind the hills, casting golden light across the pasture, Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known. The fire, the chaos, and the secrets of the past were no longer shadows lurking in memory. They were lessons, warnings, and reminders of the strength she carried within herself. Jack and Clara walked back toward the barn together, the locket safely in her hand. The animals were settling down for the evening, and the wind carried a soft, calming sound through the trees. The ranch, once a place of mystery and tension, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where the past and present could coexist peacefully. Before leaving, Clara looked at Jack. "I think we're ready now," she said softly. Jack nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "Yes, ready to move forward, together." As she stepped beyond the gate and looked back at the ranch one last time that evening, Clara felt a quiet strength growing within her. The story of the locket, the fire, and the choices made years ago had reached its conclusion. The past was understood, the secrets revealed, and the bonds of trust and care had been strengthened. She knew that life would continue with new challenges, but for the first time, she felt truly prepared to face them. The ranch lay in the glow of twilight, peaceful yet alive, a testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring power of truth. And Clara walked away, carrying the locket and her history with her, ready to embrace the future with hope, clarity, and a sense of connection that could never be broken.